The crash in the woods. The loyal dog saved an alien girl. Now the human and alien are forever linked. It was a quiet night in the small town of Fairhill. The moon was full, and the stars filled the sky. A cool breeze moved through the trees. Eli, a 17-year-old boy, walked with his dog Rex in the forest behind his house. Rex was a big German shepherd, strong and loyal. Every night, they walked the same path. It was peaceful, safe. Eli liked the quiet. He didn't have many friends. School was boring. But Rex was always with him. They understood each other without words. But that night, something strange happened. A loud boom shook the air. A flash of bright light lit up the sky. Birds flew out of the trees, scared. Then came a deep, rumbling sound like thunder. But it didn't stop. What was that? Eli said aloud, looking up. A burning object shot across the sky like a fireball. It crashed somewhere deeper in the woods. The ground shook. Smoke rose in the distance. Rex barked and ran ahead. "Rex, wait," Eli called, running after him. The forest was dark, but the smoke made it easy to follow the trail. Eli pushed through branches, jumped over rocks, and followed Rex's barks. The air smelled like metal and fire. After 10 minutes of running, he saw it. A strange object sat in a small clearing. It was shaped like an egg, but larger than a car. The metal surface was cracked. One side was open, like a door had exploded out. There was glowing blue liquid on the ground. Eli stepped closer. The air felt warm, like standing near a fire. Inside the pod, something moved. "Hello," Eli said, heart racing. "Is someone there?" Rex growled softly and moved toward the pod. Then Eli saw her. A girl, but not human. She was lying on the floor of the pod, her skin pale and glowing softly in the dark. Her hair was silver, long and messy. She had no shoes, and her clothes were torn. Her eyes were closed. She looked hurt. Rex whined and sniffed her hand. "She's just a kid," Eli whispered. "Is she alien?" He didn't know what to do. Call someone. But who would believe him? Then her eyes opened. They were bright purple. She looked at Eli, then at Rex. Her body tensed like she was scared. She tried to sit up but cried out in pain and held her side. "It's okay," Eli said softly. He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked and stared at him. "I'm Eli. This is Rex. We just want to help." The alien girl looked at Rex, then back at Eli. Slowly, she nodded. Eli reached out his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her hand was cold but soft. He helped her out of the pod. She stood weakly, shaking. Rex stayed close to her, as if he already trusted her. Suddenly, Rex turned and growled. From the trees, a low, strange sound echoed, like a growl, but not from any animal Eli knew. The leaves moved. Something big was out there, watching. Eli stepped in front of the girl. "We have to go. Now." He wrapped her arm over his shoulder and helped her walk. Rex stayed close, growling at the trees. They made it back to the path, but the sound followed them. Heavy steps, breaking branches. A shadow moved in the darkness behind them. The girl looked back, her face full of fear. "What is it? What's chasing you?" Eli asked. She tried to speak, but her voice was soft, strange. "Tracker," she whispered. "Danger." Eli didn't understand, but he didn't need to. He could feel it. Something terrible was coming. Finally, they reached Eli's small shed behind his house. He opened the door and helped her inside. It was dusty, full of tools and old furniture. Not a good hiding spot, but better than nothing. He gave her a blanket and some water. She drank slowly, watching everything. Outside, Rex barked again. Eli looked through the window. Nothing. But then, something moved. A tall, thin shadow. It didn't walk like a man. It crawled, then stood tall. Its eyes glowed red. Eli's blood ran cold. He turned to the girl. "Is that the thing?" She nodded, shaking. "Why is it after you?" She looked at him with sad eyes. "Because I escaped." Eli didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her alone. "Don't worry," he said. "You're safe now." But even as he said the words, he wasn't sure if they were true. Outside, the shadow moved closer, and Rex was ready to fight. The thing that follows. The night had grown colder. The stars above were now hidden behind thick clouds. Wind blew through the trees, shaking the leaves. Inside the small wooden shed, Eli sat near the alien girl, trying to keep her warm with an old blanket. She still hadn't told him her name. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, her knees pulled close to her chest. Her glowing skin had faded to a dull silver, and her breathing was slow. She looked tired, like her body was fighting something inside. Every once in a while, she'd flinch, like she was hearing sounds Eli couldn't hear. Rex lay between them, head resting on his paws, ears twitching. He didn't sleep. His eyes were fixed on the shed door. Eli couldn't sleep either. He looked at the girl. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "Safe. Here. For now." Her voice was soft, musical, but weak. Eli wanted to ask so many questions. Who was she? Where was she from? Why had she crashed on Earth? But the biggest question burned in his chest. "What was that thing in the woods?" he asked. "It looked like it was hunting you." The girl looked at him with tired eyes. "It is." She reached into a small pocket on her suit and pulled out a round metal disc. It glowed faintly in the dark, just like her skin had earlier. She handed it to Eli. "This is a tracker," she said. "It was inside me." Eli looked down at the small device in shock. "Inside you?" She nodded. "I removed it before the crash, but it already sent a signal." Eli's hand tightened around the disc. He felt a chill run down his spine. "It's not human," she continued. "The one chasing me. It was created to find and kill. It never stops." Eli thought back to the red eyes in the dark, the way it had moved, crawling, silent, watching. "Why is it after you?" She hesitated. "Because I escaped. From the ones who made it. From the labs." She said the last word like it tasted bitter in her mouth. "I'm not just a girl," she said. "I'm different, special. They wanted to use me as a weapon." Eli felt like the world had turned upside down. "You don't look like a weapon," he said. A faint smile touched her lips. "I'm not. I don't want to hurt anyone. That's why I ran." Outside, the wind picked up. Then, Rex growled. Eli turned. Rex stood up slowly, fur raised, teeth bared. He stared at the door. Eli grabbed a metal wrench from the workbench. His hands shook. The girl stood too, leaning on the wall for balance. Her eyes glowed faintly now. She whispered, "It's here." Bang! Something hit the side of the shed. Hard. Dust fell from the ceiling. Bang! Bang! The walls shook. Rex barked loud, his body ready to attack. Eli stepped in front of the girl, wrench in hand. Then, silence. The banging stopped. Eli held his breath. And then, crash. The back wall of the shed broke open. A long black arm reached inside, sharp claws at the end. The arm moved fast, knocking over shelves and tools. Rex lunged and bit it hard. The creature let out a deep, inhuman scream. Eli saw it clearly now. It was tall and thin, its body covered in black armor-like skin. Its face had no mouth, only red glowing eyes. It moved like a spider, but faster. It reached for the girl. Eli swung the wrench. Clang! He hit its arm. The creature pulled back and let out another horrible sound. But it wasn't hurt, just angry. The girl raised her hand. Her skin glowed bright again, blue and silver. A wave of light shot from her palm and hit the creature. It screamed and fell back, smoke rising from its chest. It wasn't dead, but it was hurt. It turned and ran into the woods, fast and silent. Everything went quiet again. Eli dropped the wrench. His heart pounded in his chest. What was that thing? The girl was breathing hard. Hunter, one of many. You mean there are more? He asked, wide-eyed. She nodded. They will come, unless we leave. Eli looked at Rex, who was licking a cut on his leg. We can't stay here. No, she said. They can smell my energy. They always find me. Then we'll move, Eli said. I'll help you. We'll find a safer place. The girl looked surprised. You would help me, even though I'm not human. Eli gave a small smile. Rex trusts you. That's good enough for me. She smiled back, her eyes soft now. My name is Zora. Nice to meet you, Zora, Eli said. Let's get out of here before that thing brings friends. As they packed what little they had, Zora looked at Rex and said, Your dog is brave. He stood between me and death. That means something, more than you know. Eli looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Zora touched Rex's head. Her skin glowed. A tiny light passed into him. He saved me, she said. Now I must protect him. And you. Eli didn't understand what just happened, but he knew one thing for sure. This night had changed everything. And whatever came next, they would face it together. Rex's brave stand. The wind howled through the trees, louder than before, like it knew something terrible was coming. The small shed in which Eli, Zora, and Rex had found shelter now felt far too small, far too fragile. Eli sat by the door, his hand resting on Rex's thick fur. The dog was alert, his ears twitching at every sound, his eyes fixed on the window. The faint glow of Zora's skin barely lit up the room. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, her eyes closed as if trying to focus her energy. Zora had explained what had happened back on her world. The experiments, the escape, the creatures who had been created to track and kill her. But there was something else. Something deeper. She had mentioned her energy, the strange bond between herself and Eli, and Rex, how they were all connected now in a way that none of them fully understood. But no matter how many times Zora explained it, Eli still had trouble believing it. He was just a normal guy, wasn't he? But everything had changed in the last 24 hours. His world had turned upside down, and now he had to keep both an alien girl and his loyal dog alive. He looked over at Zora. Do you think we're safe here? She shook her head slowly. Not for long. The hunters will keep coming. They never stop until they find me. Rex barked loudly, his voice sharp and warning. He stood up, tail straight, muscles tensed. Something was out there. Eli's heart skipped a beat. It was too quiet, too still. He couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Zora's eyes glowed brighter now, the glow of her alien power flickering under her skin. It's close, she whispered. Too close. Eli moved to the door, his hand gripping the handle, his mind racing. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. He wasn't a soldier or a hero, but he couldn't just sit and wait for whatever was out there to tear them apart. Rex's growl grew louder. His stance became more aggressive. Eli knew his dog better than anyone. Rex wasn't just protecting them. He was preparing for a fight. Eli looked down at his dog. Rex's eyes locked with his, and for a moment, it was as if the two of them understood each other completely. They were in this together, no matter what happened. Suddenly, the silence shattered. A loud crash came from the woods, followed by a rustling of leaves. Something large and fast was approaching. Eli's breath caught in his throat. The creature had returned. Zora was already standing, her hands glowing bright. We don't have much time. Get ready. The door slammed open, and the creature was there, faster than Eli had ever seen it before. It was long and lean, covered in dark, armored skin, its red eyes glowing in the dark like burning coals. It moved in a blur, claws slashing at the air, and Eli barely had time to react. But Rex reacted instantly. With a low, ferocious growl, the dog leaped at the creature, teeth bared. He crashed into it with all his strength, knocking the hunter back. The creature howled in pain, its sharp claws scraping against Rex's thick fur, but Rex didn't back down. He fought with everything in him, fiercely, desperately. Eli grabbed a metal rod from the corner of the shed and rushed forward, swinging it at the creature. It caught the rod with its claws, breaking it in two like it was nothing. The creature hissed, its red eyes flashing with fury. Zara's hand shot forward, sending a blast of blue energy toward the creature. It hit the hunter square in the chest, sending it flying back, but it quickly regained its footing. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else, something more. Eli could see the fear in Zara's eyes, even though she was trying to hide it. "It's not alone," she said, breathless. "They'll keep coming. They'll never stop." Eli didn't care. He wasn't going to let it get them. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. He stepped in front of Zara and Rex, brandishing a metal pipe in his hand. Rex barked and stood by his side, ready to fight. The creature moved forward again, its claws swinging dangerously. Rex darted in first, biting into the creature's arm, but the hunter twisted and threw Rex off like a rag doll. "No!" Eli yelled, rushing toward Rex. His dog landed hard, but he immediately jumped back to his feet, ready to fight again. The hunter's claws swung down, aiming straight for Rex, but Eli saw it coming. With everything he had, he lunged forward, pushing Rex out of the way just in time. The claws grazed his side, slicing through his shirt, but Eli barely felt the pain. His heart raced as he grabbed the creature by the arm and threw all his weight into it, trying to knock it off balance. But the creature was stronger. It spun around, slamming Eli into the ground with a force that stole the breath from his lungs. It pinned him down with one clawed foot, ready to strike. "Eli!" Zara screamed. She moved toward him, but Eli's vision blurred. Blood trickled down his face, and he couldn't move. The creature's red eyes stared down at him, cold and uncaring. But then something unexpected happened. Rex growled louder than ever before, his body trembling with pure rage. With a roar, Rex charged at the creature again, leaping high into the air. His teeth sank into the hunter's throat, and for the first time, the creature screamed in pain. Rex didn't let go. He pulled harder, tearing through the creature's armor. The creature thrashed wildly, but it was too late. With one final powerful bite, Rex tore through the hunter's neck. The creature's body went limp, and it collapsed onto the ground with a heavy thud. Rex stepped back, panting heavily, his body covered in blood. But his eyes were filled with something else. Pride. Eli staggered to his feet, clutching his side. He looked down at his loyal dog, who was already walking back toward him, tail wagging weakly. "You did it," Eli whispered. Rex gave a soft bark, as if to say, "Of course I did. I'm your dog." Zara knelt beside them, her face filled with both awe and relief. He saved you. He saved us." Eli looked at Rex, his heart swelling with gratitude. He's more than just a dog. He's family. As they stood in the silence of the woods, Eli knew one thing for sure. The fight was far from over. But with Rex by his side, and Zara, who was more than she seemed, they might just survive whatever came next. The alien hunters. The dawn was just beginning to break through the thick canopy of trees when Eli and Zara stepped cautiously out of the shed. The air was cold and damp, and a mist hummed low over the forest floor. Rex trotted ahead, his nose sniffing the ground, his tail flicking back and forth with alertness. He had been through many battles in his life, but this was something entirely different. The air itself seemed heavy, full of something unknown, something dangerous. Eli looked at Zora, his eyes tired but determined. "We can't stay here," he said. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the forest itself might hear them. "That creature, it's not alone." Zara nodded, her bright purple eyes reflecting both worry and resolve. "They will keep coming. The hunters will search for me until they find me." "But why? Why are they so obsessed with you?" Eli asked, his voice tight with frustration. Zara looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edges of a small symbol on her arm, a mark that had never been explained fully. "I am not like them. I was born to be more than a tool, but they saw me as one. The hunters, they were made to track and destroy. I escaped their control, and they won't stop until I'm back in their hands." Eli frowned, glancing down at Rex, who looked up at him with intelligent, knowing eyes. The bond between him and the dog had deepened since that first night, when they'd fought side by side. Now Eli could feel the connection between them, a bond forged in fire, loyalty, and battle. He wasn't alone anymore. Neither of them were. But as much as he wanted to believe they could outrun the danger, the weight of Zara's words echoed in his mind. "We can't outrun them forever," Eli said. "We need a plan." Zara turned toward the trees, scanning the forest around them with sharp, focused eyes. "I know a place, a safe place. For a while." Eli nodded, and without another word, the three of them began to move deeper into the forest. The mist made everything look dreamlike, as if they were walking through a world that wasn't quite real. But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they walked, Zara began to speak of her world, her home planet, and the people she had left behind. She described vast cities that reached to the skies, filled with advanced technology and rich cultures. But all that had changed when the leaders of her planet decided to use her as a weapon. She wasn't the only one like her. There were others, ones that had been created, experimented on, and used for their abilities. "They made us," she explained softly. "But they couldn't control us." The forest seemed to grow quieter with each step, as if it too was listening to her words. Rex stopped suddenly, his nose twitching. He looked back at Eli, then toward Zora, his body tense. "What's wrong?" Eli asked, his voice low. Zora's eyes narrowed. "They're close." Eli turned, heart racing. The trees were still and silent. The sunlight barely broke through the thick branches. And then, in the distance, he saw it. Movement. The shadows between the trees shifted, a flicker of black. Rex barked sharply, the sound echoing in the stillness. Zara's hand moved quickly to her side, glowing with energy. "Stay behind me," she whispered to Eli. But before Eli could respond, the ground shook. The trees around them cracked and groaned as something massive moved through the forest. It wasn't just one creature. It was a whole group, and they were closing in fast. The first one appeared from the shadows, its long, bony frame stepping out into the dim light. Its eyes were wide and bloodshot, its skin covered in jagged, sharp scales. It was taller than Eli, its mouth opening in a grotesque snarl that sent a chill down his spine. Behind it came more, dozens of them. The hunters. They had tracked Zara here, and now they were coming for her. Zara stepped forward, her energy glowing brighter now, her face set with determination. "We have to fight. It's the only way." Eli swallowed hard, gripping a branch he had picked up along the way. His heart pounded in his chest, but his eyes never left the creatures approaching. Rex growled, stepping beside Eli, ready to charge. But Zara held out her hand. "No. Wait. We need to be smart about this." The creatures slowed their approach, watching them. They were calculating, studying them. Eli could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. He glanced at Zara, his heart racing. "You said you knew a place," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Is it far?" Zara nodded, her voice steady despite the fear that was surely bubbling beneath the surface. "It's not far, but we have to move now. If they catch us here, we won't make it." Without another word, she turned, and they ran. The hunters followed. Eli pushed himself harder, his breath coming in ragged gasps as they sped through the trees. Rex was just ahead of them, his powerful legs propelling him forward with incredible speed, his senses guiding him through the dense forest. He was leading them, his instincts sharper than any human could understand. The sounds of pursuit came quickly, the heavy thuds of the hunters' feet pounding on the forest floor, the scraping of claws against bark, and the low growls that made Eli's skin crawl. They were gaining. Zara's energy flared again, her hands glowing brightly as she sent blasts of light behind them. The energy surged toward the hunters, pushing them back momentarily, but it wasn't enough to stop them. The creatures were relentless. "We need to split up," Zara said, her voice urgent. "I'll lead them away. You and Rex go on ahead. I'll catch up." "No way," Eli said, his voice firm. "I'm not leaving you behind." Zara turned to him, her eyes full of determination. "You don't have a choice. If they catch me, they'll catch you too. I'll be fine. Just go." Eli hesitated, his heart torn. But Zara was right. If they didn't move quickly, they'd all be trapped. With one last look at Zara, Eli turned and followed Rex, who had already bounded off into the woods. The hunters were distracted, but they wouldn't stay that way for long. As they ran, Eli's thoughts raced. Where was the place Zara was talking about? Was it really safe? Was she going to be all right? He pushed the questions away, focusing only on staying ahead of the creatures chasing them. But as they ran deeper into the woods, Eli knew one thing. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. The bond awakens. The forest seemed to close in around Eli as he ran, his breath sharp and ragged in his chest. His legs ached, but he didn't dare slow down. Rex was ahead of him, moving like a shadow through the trees, his powerful legs cutting through the underbrush. He didn't need to look back. He knew Rex would lead them to safety. But something else was happening, something Eli couldn't explain. Every time he glanced at the dog, he saw something more than just a loyal pet. There was an intensity in Rex's eyes, a deep connection between the two of them that felt different, stronger. It was like Rex was sensing something that Eli couldn't. The bond between them was growing. And as they ran deeper into the forest, Eli realized the bond wasn't just between him and Rex anymore. It was something more. It was Zora. She wasn't physically with them, but Eli could feel her presence in his mind. Her thoughts, her fear, her determination. They were there, like whispers in the wind. It was the energy. The connection she had warned him about, the one that had linked all three of them together. Eli stopped for a moment, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. He had to concentrate. He had to focus. He could feel Zora's energy, a soft pulse of warmth that came through the bond, like a quiet heartbeat. He closed his eyes, trying to focus on it. He could almost hear her voice in his mind, distant but clear. "Eli," he gasped, looking around. The forest was still, but the voices he had only felt before were louder now. Zara's energy, her presence, was so much stronger than before. "Eli, you must be careful." It wasn't just Zara's voice. It was Rex too. Through the bond, he could feel the dog's warning, his own instincts blending with Zora's. It was like they were all connected in a way Eli had never experienced before. He wasn't just hearing them. He was feeling them. He took a step forward, following Rex again. The bond felt like a thread that pulled him through the forest, guiding him, keeping him focused. It wasn't just his own will anymore. It was something deeper, something ancient. Rex stopped up ahead, his nose twitching. His ears perked up, his body still. Something was coming. Eli moved quietly, not daring to make a sound. The bond between him and Rex told him to stay calm. Rex had sensed something important. Ahead, a figure emerged from the trees. It was Zora, her glowing eyes shimmering in the dim light, her skin faintly glowing. She was out of breath, but her expression was calm. Too calm. Eli rushed toward her. "Zara, are you okay?" She held up a hand, her voice steady. "I'm fine, but we need to hurry. The hunters are close." She didn't say anything more, but Eli felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. They weren't safe. Not yet. Zara turned and motioned for them to follow her. "The place I know is just ahead. But we can't stop now. The hunters will be close behind. We need to move." Without another word, they pressed forward. But as they moved deeper into the woods, Eli felt something different in the air. The bond between them was getting stronger by the second. He could feel Zara's energy swirling around him like a protective shield, her power filling the space between them. Rex, too, was more connected than ever. Eli could feel his every movement, his every thought. It was as if they were all one, working in perfect harmony. Then, just as they reached a clearing, Eli felt something new. A flash of energy shot through him, a surge of power that made his skin tingle. The bond was not just connecting them, it was transforming them. He staggered, clutching his head as a wave of dizziness washed over him. The bond was awakening, growing more powerful by the minute. The feeling was overwhelming, but it wasn't painful. It was alive, like a force that flowed through him and around him, making him feel connected to everything. The earth beneath his feet, the trees above him, Zara's energy beside him, and Rex's presence ever watchful. Zara turned toward him, her face full of concern. "Eli, hold on. The bond is too strong right now. You have to focus." Eli closed his eyes and focused on the bond, on the connection between them. He couldn't let it control him. He had to control it. He breathed deeply, focusing on the steady rhythm of his heart, the pulse of energy that surrounded him. Slowly, the overwhelming feeling began to subside. The connection between them was still there, stronger than ever. But it wasn't as overpowering. It felt more balanced. "I can feel it," Eli whispered. "I can feel everything." Zora's eyes softened. "Good. You're starting to understand." Rex looked at him, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The bond between the dog and Eli was almost like an extension of his own body now. Eli could feel Rex's thoughts as clearly as his own, his loyalty, his strength, his readiness to protect. Zara stepped closer to him, her energy pulsing with power. "The bond is not just between you and me. It's between all of us." Rex, too. Eli blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. What does that mean?" Zara smiled slightly. "It means that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. Our fates are intertwined now. We're bound by more than just survival. We're bound by something much deeper." As she spoke, Eli began to understand. The bond was more than just an energy connection. It was a link that tied their lives together in ways he couldn't explain. It was a power that went beyond what any of them could control, yet they all shared it now. Rex, Zara, and Eli. "Are you saying that I can feel what Rex feels?" Eli asked, his voice full of awe. Zara nodded. "And I can feel what you feel. It's not just the bond of survival. It's a bond of trust, of protection. And that's why we need each other." Eli looked down at Rex, who was watching him intently. He could feel the dog's loyalty, his care. It was like they were speaking without words, understanding each other completely. Rex's energy mixed with Zora's, and Eli could feel it surrounding him, protecting him. They weren't just a human and a dog anymore. They were something more, something stronger. "We can't afford to ignore this bond," Zara said. "The hunters are coming. But this connection, it might be the only thing that can save us." Eli nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Then we'll use it." The bond was more than just a tool for survival. It was a weapon they could wield together. As they continued forward, Eli knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. He had Rex, and he had Zara. and together they were stronger than anything the hunters could throw at them. The final fight. The clearing was quiet, eerily quiet, when they arrived. Zara had led them to a place deep within the forest, far from their previous location. It was a large open area, surrounded by dense trees. A small stream ran through it, the water sparkling in the dim light of dusk. It should have been peaceful. It should have felt like safety. But Eli could feel the tension in the air. He knew it wouldn't be peaceful for long. Zara stopped at the edge of the clearing, her bright purple eyes scanning the horizon. Her body was tense, every muscle coiled, ready for whatever was about to come. Rex stood beside her, his body low to the ground, his eyes never leaving the trees. "They're here," Zara whispered, her voice low but full of conviction. Eli's pulse quickened. He could feel the bond between them pulsing stronger than ever. He wasn't just aware of his own heartbeat now. He could feel Zora's too. Her fear, her resolve. It all bled into him. And more than that, he could feel Rex's heart, steady and strong, thumping in rhythm with his own. The energy between them had become something undeniable, something bigger than just the three of them. Eli had never believed in something like this, but now he couldn't deny it. The bond had grown too powerful to ignore. Zara turned toward him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You're ready. Both of you." Before Eli could respond, a sudden sound shattered the silence, a bone-chilling screech. It wasn't a bird or any animal Eli had ever heard. It was unnatural, echoing through the trees like the sound of metal scraping against stone. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and many. They were surrounded. Eli's heart raced as he scanned the area. The hunters were closing in on them from every direction. These weren't the same creatures they had faced before. These were worse, stronger, faster, and more numerous. Zara stepped forward, raising her hand to her chest, her energy glowing brighter. The air around her hummed with raw power. "Stay close," she said, her voice calm but with an underlying force. "I'll protect you, but we have to be smart." Eli nodded, gripping the metal pipe he picked up earlier. His hands were trembling, but his determination kept him moving. Rex was already in motion, moving between them like a blur, his eyes tracking every movement. And then, the first of the hunters appeared from the trees, its black-scaled body glistening in the fading light. It was taller than the others, its eyes burning red, glowing with malice. It snarled, its claws flexing in the air as it sized them up. Behind it, more emerged from the shadows. At least 10, each one a grotesque version of the one they had already fought. But these weren't just predators. They were soldiers. They were hunters bred for one purpose: to track and kill Zara. Rex's growl was low, deep, and full of rage. He stepped forward, teeth bared. Eli's pulse quickened as the first hunter lunged at him, its claws aimed straight for his throat. Time seemed to slow. But before the creature could reach him, Rex was there, leaping into the air and sinking his teeth into the hunter's neck. The creature howled, thrashing in an attempt to free itself, but Rex held firm, his powerful jaws cutting through the hunter's armor. Eli's heart slammed in his chest as the fight began in full force. He swung the metal pipe, hitting another hunter square in the chest. The impact sent it stumbling backward, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The hunter recovered quickly and lunged at him, its claws tearing through the air with incredible speed. Zara's energy surged, lighting up the clearing like a small sun. With a swift movement, she sent a blast of energy toward the hunter, pushing it back. It screamed, caught off guard by the force of the attack, and crumpled to the ground. But they weren't done. The remaining hunters closed in fast, and they were more determined than ever. Eli fought with everything he had, using the pipe to defend himself. But the creatures were relentless. They were faster, stronger, and seemed to be everywhere. The clearing, once peaceful, had become a war zone. The sounds of combat echoed through the trees as Eli, Rex, and Zara fought side by side, but the odds were stacking against them. Zara's energy crackled in the air, her hands moving like lightning as she sent waves of power toward the hunters, knocking them back one by one. But it wasn't enough. There were too many of them, and they were learning. They were adapting. Eli ducked as one of the hunters swung a claw at his head, narrowly missing him. He scrambled backward, trying to catch his breath, but his body was already starting to tire. He couldn't keep this up for much longer. Rex, however, was relentless. He darted between the hunters, his body a blur of speed and strength, tearing through the enemies with his sharp teeth and unyielding power. His loyalty to Eli, to Zara, and to their cause was stronger than anything the hunters could throw at them. But even Rex, with all his strength, couldn't fight them all. Just as Eli thought they might be overrun, something in the bond between them shifted. A surge of energy flooded through him, through all of them, and Eli felt the connection between himself, Zara, and Rex become a single unified force. It was like they were one entity, working in perfect harmony. The energy that coursed through them was overwhelming. But in that moment, it wasn't just a connection. It was a weapon they could control. Eli closed his eyes and focused, letting the energy surge through him. He could feel it flowing through his limbs, his heart, and into his mind. It was Zora's power, but it was also his. And it was Rex's too. Together, they were unstoppable. With a roar, Eli released the energy, sending a massive shockwave of light and force toward the hunters. The blast hit the creatures like a thunderclap, sending them flying backward, their bodies thrown into the trees with bone-shaking impacts. The hunters staggered, but they didn't fall. They were still coming. Zara, her energy crackling around her, stepped forward, raising her hand high. A beam of pure light shot from her palm, and in a split second, it collided with the leader of the hunters. The creature screamed, its body disintegrating under the power of the blast. Eli and Rex moved with her, the bond between them stronger than ever. Together, they were more than just a human, a dog, and an alien girl. They were a force of nature. One by one, the remaining hunters fell, their bodies disintegrating under the combined force of their power. When the last of the hunters was finally defeated, the clearing fell silent. Eli stood, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the fight, but the bond still pulsed within him, the energy still flowing through him. Zara lowered her hand, her face tired but calm. "We did it," she said softly. Eli looked down at Rex, who stood beside him, panting but unscathed. He smiled, a mix of exhaustion and relief in his eyes. "Yeah, we did." Zara stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly. "The bond. It's more than just survival. It's our strength, and it will keep us safe, no matter what." Eli nodded. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. Forever linked. The air was still. The last remnants of the battle were fading, and the echoes of the hunters' screams had long since died. Now, there was only silence, an odd, peaceful silence that hung over the forest, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Eli stood in the center of the clearing, his body bruised and exhausted, but his spirit unbroken. He looked around at the scene, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their shadows stretching long in the fading light of evening. His heart still pounded in his chest, but there was a quiet strength in him now, a confidence born from what they had just accomplished. Zara stood beside him, her glowing skin now faint, her energy having been spent in the final moments of the battle. Her eyes were dimmer than they had been, but there was a peace in them that had not been there before. The fear, the anxiety that had followed her since the crash, had faded. In its place, there was something new, something stronger. "We did it," Eli said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara nodded, her expression unreadable but resolute. "Yes, we did, but we're not finished yet." Eli frowned, glancing at her. "What do you mean?" "The hunters are gone. They're defeated. "The hunters may be gone," Zora replied, her voice steady. "But the ones who created them, they're still out there. They'll keep coming. They won't stop until they have me." Eli's heart tightened. He had hoped that the battle they had fought was the end of it, that they could finally be free. But Zora's words hit him harder than he expected. There was no real safety. Not yet. Their fight wasn't over. "We can't keep running forever," Eli said, a determined edge to his voice. "We'll find a way to stop them. Together." Zora's eyes met his, her gaze soft but intense. "You don't understand. The ones who created the hunters, they're more powerful than you can imagine. I'm just one of many, and they won't stop until they have what they want." For a moment, Eli felt the weight of her words. He understood that Zora was no ordinary alien. She was something far more important. And yet, despite the immense danger they faced, despite the challenges that lay ahead, Eli couldn't help but feel a deep sense of resolve. He wasn't going to let them take her. He looked down at Rex, who was standing by his side, watching them with his ever-loyal, intelligent eyes. The dog had never left his side, not once, and now, more than ever, Eli knew he wasn't just fighting for Zora. He was fighting for Rex too. For both of them. "This is bigger than all of us, isn't it?" Eli asked, his voice quiet, almost to himself. Zora didn't answer right away, but her expression softened. "It is. But that doesn't mean we can't fight back. Together, we're stronger than any of them. The bond we share, it's more than just a connection. It's a force." Eli felt the truth of her words in his bones. The bond. He had felt it too. It was something he couldn't explain, something beyond his understanding, but it was there. It was in the way he could sense Zora's emotions, feel her pain, and even her strength. And it was in the way he could feel Rex too, his loyalty and his power intertwined with their own. He looked up at Zora again. "You said the bond connects us. You said it's our strength. But what does that mean for the future?" Zora smiled softly, her eyes glowing faintly. "It means that, no matter where we go, no matter what happens, we will always be connected. It's not just a bond of survival anymore. It's a bond of family." Eli's heart skipped a beat at her words. Family. It was a word he had never expected to use when he first met Zora. But now it felt right. They weren't just survivors in a fight for their lives. They were something more. A team. A unit. Bound together by more than just their circumstances. "What happens now?" Eli asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Zora's gaze shifted toward the horizon, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the forest. "Now we prepare. They'll come for me again, but this time, we'll be ready. I've seen it. I've felt it through the bond. We have the strength to fight back. But we need to build our allies. We need to find others like me." "Others like you?" Eli asked, raising an eyebrow. Zora nodded, her face serious. "I'm not the only one. There are others like me out there, alien beings who have escaped, who are hiding from those who created us. Together, we can form an army, a resistance against those who would control us." Eli's mind raced. The idea of forming a resistance, of bringing together others who had escaped, was both daunting and exhilarating. But he could see it now. He could see how it would work, how they could change the future, not just for themselves, but for others like Zora. "And what about you?" Eli asked softly. "What happens to you in all of this?" Zora turned to face him, her eyes glowing with purpose. "I will help lead them. I will help them find their way to safety. But my fight is far from over. I still have to confront the ones who created me. I will face them. I won't run anymore." Eli felt the weight of her words, but there was something in her voice, a confidence, a determination, that he hadn't heard before. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her purpose. He nodded. "Then I'm with you. We all are." Rex barked softly, as though to agree. His eyes were full of understanding, as if he, too, knew that this fight wasn't over, that it would never be over until they had secured a future for themselves, for Zara, and for those like her. Zara's eyes softened as she looked at Rex. "We're forever linked now," she said, her voice a whisper of something ancient, something undeniable. "And nothing will ever tear us apart." For the first time since the crash, Eli felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. It was as if the universe had decided that, despite the odds, despite the darkness that lay ahead, they would stand together. They would fight together. And they would win. The bond they shared wasn't just about survival. It was about unity, trust, and the power of family. Eli looked out over the clearing, his heart filled with hope. They weren't just running anymore. They weren't hiding. They were preparing for something bigger. They were preparing to change the future. Together.